When home wasn't safe, growing up with an abusive and aggressive parent. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. When you think about your childhood, what do you feel? Warmth, safety, comfortable, or comfort? Or do you feel tension, fear, anxiety? The feeling that you always had to be careful. Some people grew up in homes where they felt loved, protected, safe, but others grew up in homes where they never knew what mood a parent would be in. A home where voices suddenly became shouting, where a small mistake could lead to criticism, where anger could appear without warning, where children learned to walk on eggshells. If that was your childhood, this video is for you. Because many adults do not realize that they are still carrying the emotional effects of growing up with an abusive or aggressive parent. They think that was years ago. I should be over it by now. It wasn't that bad. But the nervous system remembers what the mind tries to forget. The child who never felt safe often grows into an adult who struggles with anxiety, people pleasing, low self worth, emotional exhaustion, relationship difficulties, or constant fear of making mistakes. The truth is, children are not supposed to fear the people who are meant to protect them. A child's home should be their safest place. But when home becomes unpredictable, the brain begins to adapt. And those adaptations often follow us into adulthood. Walking on eggshells. One of the most common experiences children describe when growing up with an aggressive parent is this: I never knew what was going to happen next. Sometimes the parent was calm, sometimes loving, sometimes helping, and then suddenly everything changed. A small mistake became a big problem. A small question triggered anger. A harmless comment caused an argument, and the child never understood why. So the child learns to become extremely alert. They start watching people's faces, listening to the tone of their voice, trying to predict moods, trying to prevent conflict, trying not to make mistakes, trying not to upset anyone. Psychologists sometimes call this hypervigilance, but children do not call it that. Children simply call it survival. The child begins asking questions like, is mom angry today? Is dad in a bad mood? Should I stay quiet? Should I leave the room? Should I hide my feelings? And after years of living this way, the brain begins to believe that danger can appear at any moment, even when there is no danger. Even years later, even after childhood has ended. This is why many adults who grew up in aggressive homes struggle to relax. Their bodies is still preparing for a threat that is no longer there. Their nervous system is still waiting for the next emotional storm. The child who became the peacemaker. Many children grew up in difficult homes, take on roles they were never supposed to carry. Some become the peacemaker. They try to stop arguments. They try to keep everyone happy. They become responsible for everybody else's emotions. Imagine a child believing, if everyone is happy, maybe there will be no shouting today. If I behave perfectly, maybe there will be no anger today. If I keep the peace, Maybe everyone will be okay, but that is a burden no child should carry. Children are meant to learn, to play, to feel safe, to make mistakes, not to manage the emotions of adults. Yet, many children grow up believing it is my job to keep everyone calm, and that belief often follows them into childhood. Why people pleasing begins. Years later, those same children often become adults who struggle to say no, adults who apologize too much, adults who feel guilty setting boundaries, adults who worry about disappointing people, adults who constantly put other people's need before their own. From the outside, people say, "Oh, you're so kind, you're so caring, you're so helpful," and perhaps they are, but sometimes underneath that kindness is fear, fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of upsetting someone, fear of losing connection. Many people pleasers are not simply trying to be nice, they are trying to stay emotionally safe. A strategy that once protected them as children continues long into adulthood. When criticism becomes your inner voice. Another hidden effects of growing up with a critical or aggressive parent is that eventually the parent's voice becomes your own voice. You start criticizing yourself, judging yourself, doubting yourself. You make a mistake and immediately think, I'm useless. I'm not good enough. I always get things wrong. The sad part is many adults do not even realize they are speaking to themselves the same way they were spoken to as a childhood, as a children. The criticism became internal. The parent left the room years ago, but the voice stayed. And over time, that inner critic can damage confidence, self worth, relationships, career growth, and emotional well being. Because it becomes very difficult to believe in yourself when part of your mind is constantly attacking you. Why some children become angry adults? Not every child responds to an aggressive parent in the same way. Some become anxious, some become quiet, some become people pleasers, and some become angry. Because anger was the language spoken at home, anger was what they witnessed, anger was what they learned. Sometimes these adults later feel ashamed of their reactions. They tell themselves, I sound just like my father. I sound just like my mother. I promise I would never be like them. And this can create enormous guilt because underneath the anger, there is often a wounded child, a child who never felt safe, a child who never felt understood, a child who was carrying far more than any child should ever have to carry. When childhood follows you into adulthood, many people believe childhood is over. But the truth is, childhood often follows us into adulthood, not in the form of memories, but in the form of patterns. The child who was always criticized often becomes the adult who constantly doubt themselves. The child who was always blamed often becomes the adult who apologizes for everything. The child who never felt safe often becomes the adult who struggles to relax. The child who lived with anger often becomes the adult who fears conflict or create conflict. This is why many adults find themselves reacting to situations without fully understanding why. A delayed text message feels deeply upsetting. Criticism feels unbearable. Conflict feels terrifying. Disapproval feels devastating. And rejection feels almost impossible to tolerate. Because the adult is not only reacting to the present moment, sometimes the nervous system is reacting to years of accumulated experiences. The nervous system never forgets. One thing modern psychology and neuroscience have taught us is that trauma is not simply a memory. Trauma is something the body remembers. When a child grows up in an unpredictable environment, the brain learns to stay alert, always scanning, always preparing, always waiting for the next emotional storm. Researchers have found that the chronic childhood stress can influence how the nervous system responds to threat later in life. The brain becomes highly sensitive to signs of danger, even when no danger exists. This is why some adults remain constantly tense, constantly worried, constantly preparing for the worst. Their body learned survival long before it learned safety. So, why healing feels so difficult? If you grew up with an abusive or aggressive parent, healing can sometimes feel confusing because the behaviors that helped you survive as a child may now be creating difficulties as an adult. As a child, being hyper alert protected you. Watching people's moods protected you. Avoiding conflict protected you. Keeping everyone happy protected you. Staying quiet protected you. But now, those same survival strategies may be exhausting you. You may constantly overthink. You may struggle to trust people. You may fear criticism. You may find it difficult to relax. You may feel responsible for everybody else's emotion. And because these patterns have existed for many years, they often feel normal. You may not even realize they came from childhood. You simply believe this is just who I am. But healing often begins when you understand something important. These patterns are not your personality. Many of them are survival strategies. And what was learned can be unlearned. This is very important to understand that what was learned can be unlearned. That does not happen overnight, but it is possible. Learning emotional safety for the first time. One of the strangest experiences many trauma survivors describe is this. For the first time in their lives, they experience emotional safety and they do not know what to do with it. Because when you grow up in chaos, peace can feel unfamiliar. When you grow up expecting criticism, kindness can feel suspicious. When you grow up waiting for anger, healthy relationships can feel uncomfortable. Many people assume healing means becoming stronger, but often healing means learning something completely different. Learning safety, learning trust, learning self compassion, learning that not every disagreement leads to rejection, learning that not every mistake makes you a bad person, learning that your needs matter too. For some people, this may be the first time they have ever experienced being listened to what without judgment, the first time they have ever felt emotionally understood, the first time they have ever felt safe enough to be themselves, and that can be life changing. Healing is possible. If you grew up in a home that did not feel safe, I want you to hear this clearly. What happened to you matters. The fear mattered. The loneliness mattered. The confusion mattered. The pain mattered. Many people spend years minimizing their experiences. They tell themselves others had it worse. It wasn't that bad. I should be over it by now. But healing does not begin with denial. Healing begins with honesty. Healing begins when we stop pretending that the pain never existed. The goal is not to blame your parents forever. The goal is not to remain trapped in anger. The goal is understanding, awareness, growth, and freedom. Because your childhood may explain your struggles, but it does not have to define your future. You can learn healthier boundaries. You can learn emotional regulation. You can learn to trust yourself. You can learn to feel safe. You can learn to build relationships that are based on respect rather than fear. And little by little, you can become the safe person that your younger self needed. Healing healing is not about becoming perfect. Healing is about becoming whole. The child who survived. If this video brought back memories or helped you understand yourself in a new way, I want you to remember something. The child you once were did the best they could with the environment they were given. That child learned how to survive. That child carried burdens they should never have had to carry. That child adapted to circumstances that were never their fault. And perhaps today, for the first time, you can look back at the child with compassion instead of criticism. You do not need to hate that child. You do not need to judge that child. You do not need to be ashamed of that child. That child deserves understanding. That child deserves kindness. That child deserves healing. And so do you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Please take gentle care of yourself and thank you for listening. If today's discussion spoke to something you have been silently carrying and you would like to better understand emotional loneliness, hidden pain, survival mode, self worth, and emotional healings, my book, Strong Outside and Empty Inside, may help. The book explores many of the emotional struggles that people quietly carry for years while appearing strong on the outside. The link to the book can be found in the video description and in the pinned comment below. Thank you for listening.